Hello YouTube! In Frontier Development's daily salt farming activities, we have the hashtag support third party, why we temporarily shut down the third party sites. This happened earlier today. They're already back up and running. But this is a very interesting tale because this is a microcosm of really what is probably the single biggest failure from Frontier when it comes to their handling of Elite Dangerous, especially over the course of the past year. And that has been their just stone deaf cold silence to community feedback in general. And reading through the history that they posted through here, I mean, what their experiences with trying to deal with Frontier just echoes, is a microcosm of, I think, what a lot of us in the player community have felt on the whole. So basically what happened is most of the third-party tool sites that are routinely used, the Coriolis shipyards, ED Shipyard, Inara, EDDB, EDDBDBD, I don't think you have enough repeated letters there. At any rate, they all shut down their sites. Originally the plan was to be shut down from noon today Zulu until noon Sunday Zulu, basically to coincide with this major event on Saturday. And they kind of went on to air their grievances, but most of the sites are already back up. You know, oh, well, we got Frontier's attention and they gave us lip service. But if you go through and read their history, you kind of have to wonder, okay, they've said, you know, we'll try to put down this fault, you know, this fire here, but are they going to follow through? Because it seems like you've heard some of these things before. If you even look back at your own history that you posted here, you know, and if past behavior is more indicative of future expectations here, well, let's just go through it. And I'm going to tell you, I've tried to record this video a couple times before, and long story short, this is going to be 30 or 40 minutes. A brief history of Frontier and community developers. And I will say when I interject here, I think why a lot of the community, especially here in the last couple of weeks, have really started throwing salt at them. Because their experience with trying to develop third-party tools really echoes what I think a lot of the rest of us have been trying to say for a couple of years now. So December 2014, Elite Dangerous launched. During the beta before Elite Dangerous even was released, the community had already begun building tools to map the galaxy, optimize trading, commodity trading. Some of the tools that date back to this period are Threads website, Slopey's market tool, Trade Dangerous console helper, and this is also when Elite Dangerous Data Network was established, which allows tools to send and receive and share market price data. January 2015, EDDN and the API. A couple of weeks after release, EDDB launched with full EDDN, again, not enough repeated consonants there. At that point, the only way to automatically collect market price data from the game was Seekback's Elite OCR. This was used optical character recognition to process screenshots of the market prices, which were sent via EDDN to EDDB. The data quality was often very poor since OCR produces a lot of errors, so we had to spend a lot of time fixing and cleaning the price stream. In mid-January, Michael Brooks posted the external API requirements thread on the forums, and a month later it was closed, stating that Frontier would need, quote, a few weeks, unquote, to put together a proposal and invite community developers to a working group. This was a very promising early indication that Frontier was serious about supporting third-party development, but it would be another 18 months before we saw any concrete follow-through on this idea. To be honest, at that period of time, that's how many of us who had played through the betas felt about interacting with Frontier, with very clear, measurable progression every 6 to 8 weeks, very positive signs. And then, kind of like what happened here, we saw a failure of communication past that point after release, and really subsequently, many things just not followed through on from Frontier's side for whatever reasons. June 2015, Frontier's Companion API, or Companion App API. Frontier released an iOS companion app in November 2014 and later discontinued it. The app used an undocumented API to pull information from within the game, and although it was almost immediately reverse engineered, it would be several more months before it saw widespread use by the community. In April of 2015, Argor, I'm sorry if I'm butchering that, released the Elite Dangerous Companion Emulator to demonstrate how to tap into that API. And by June, this capability had been incorporated into tools such as Trade Dangerous and Otis B's Elite Dangerous Market Connector, in order to retrieve market data and share it with other tools via EDDN. This was a giant leap forward for the community because we suddenly had access to accurate market data without the need for error-prone OCR. It's fair to say that this breakthrough is largely responsible for the wide selection of wonderful trading tools that exist today. Unfortunately, Frontier did not seem to share our excitement and responded by deleting any forum thread that related to our usage of the API. A moderator explained in a private message that our standing orders are to remove posts about links to any software that accesses the game client, the servers, and then our game client or the servers. This includes the companion API. But the API kept on working, and it was an extremely useful tool, so we kept using it. We didn't know where we stood in the legal context and tried to get an official statement from Frontier, but it was another 8 months before they would comment on it one way or the other. October 2015, Power Play data. To their credit, Frontier tried to publish weekly Power Play data for use by the community. Unfortunately, this data had not been as useful as it could have been because it's a snapshot of the Power Play state taken several hours before the actual in-game cycle changes. This means the data is always slightly off, showing a large number of systems in the wrong state, with no way of knowing which ones are affected. We asked for a fix to this many times, and we were told that it would be passed along, but nothing has changed. Once again, we've been told this from the community before, that bug reports are passed along, feedback, constructive feedback, and or otherwise has been passed along, yet rarely, if any time, sees any action on it, unless it's a 2.1 or a 2.3 level mistake with serious issues that basically a significant number of the community comes out with the pitchforks sharpened. At any rate, continuing on, December 2015. Release 2.0 and the open letter. Despite Frontier's continuing silence on the issue, usage of the companion API by EDMC and other tools continued to grow until the whole market ecosystem became dependent upon it. But with the release of Elite Dangerous 2.0 on the 15th of December, the API suddenly stopped working, and the whole trading-related third-party scene came to a grinding halt since nothing got updated anymore. It took Frontier almost a week to correct the problem, and it was likely could have been avoided entirely if Frontier had included the companion API in their beta testing. But they never have. The same thing could be said if they actually listened to feedback and fixed bugs during their beta testing process before releasing to live to begin with. Again, this is just a microcosm of the problems the Frontier has as a whole. Instead, API changes and breakages simply appear without warning and when the final patch is released. Well, there are other features that are added in a broken state whenever they publish to live too, so again, their experience is kind of indicative of the rest of the community. Leaving the community in the lurch until Frontier can get around to fixing it after the fact. Talk to Xbox One players after the release of 2.3 here. This situation caused a lot of frustration amongst us developers. Hey, it also creates a lot of frustration amongst us consumers and players, too. Not so much because of any of the outages. Many of us work as a career in software developers. We know bugs and downtime sometimes happens. But because Frontier still didn't talk to us and didn't seem to consider our projects or our users to be a priority. This seems to happen just not with the API group, but with Frontier's inactions and silence with the community as a whole when it comes to feedback. As a result, we wrote an open letter to Frontier, and the community has made hundreds, if not thousands, of posts on Reddit, social media, and their forums about ideas in which areas of gameplay should be expanded to deliver a much deeper, meaningful, rewarding experience in terms of gameplay that have gone basically without answer for years at this point, at any rate, which was signed by many of the active third-party developers at the time and asking for better communication from Frontier. Hell, anybody that plays this game and keeps an eye on it wants better communication from Frontier. Doesn't necessarily happen, which is probably the crux of all of their problems and the reason why they get salt. It received a lot of attention amongst the whole community, and Frontier finally allowed us to make use of the existing API officially, and offered some indications they would look into improving their API support in the future. Much like we'll get around to crime and punishment, but we don't know if or when. February 2016, a private letter. Unfortunately, that was the end of the conversation. So what was that, about 2 months? There was no follow-up of discussion of any specific API development plans, and there was a little response to reports of continuing problems with existing API. Because of that lack of communication, the community had no idea what to expect. Was Frontier hard at work at developing a new and improved API? Were they working on the bugs with the existing system? Were they just going to shut it down completely at any moment? We didn't know, and they wouldn't say. This is kind of indicative of their game development process as a whole. 2.4 is still question mark. And that's not to say at this point you can't tell us of what some of the things that are on the horizon as far as that is concerned, without revealing any story-based narrative things. If we want to keep that under wraps, that's fine. But what about gameplay features and functionalities that could be coming or being addressed? Here we are 18 months, 4/5 of the way through the cycle. We still don't know what 2.4 is going to be about. In the face of this uncertainty, we organized ourselves and founded the Elite Dangerous Community Developers. We wrote a private letter to Zach Antonacci, sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, Frontier's head of community management, to explain our continuing frustration and to request fixes for the outstanding API bugs, as well as a timeline of Frontier's API's development plans. Above all, we were once again requested more regular communication between Frontier and EDCD. But to partially quote Zach's reply, the situation is the same as the last response we gave over there. Isn't really any additional ongoing communication we can give at this time. So once again, that was the end of the conversation. Once again, this is indicative of a typical Frontier response, which may have been fine during the alpha beta stage, maybe even during the first year post-release, but we're getting to the point where this response, given the problems with 2.1 and the issues that it addressed or put into the game that then took months to go back and resolve, the fact of what we're seeing with 2.3 is certainly not meeting with people's expectations in many respects. That a little bit of communication, a little bit of back and forth, or acknowledgement that, hey, the community has put forth some very constructive and good ideas on how to expand the depth and breadth of gameplay to make things more engaging and entertaining, and I think better for all. But this is usually the line we get back is either stone cold silence, we're passing it back, or no comment. All too often. Or if they do comment, yes, it's on the list, but we don't know if or when we'll actually get to it. So, July 2016, The Journal. In July of 2016, we were informed that the 2.2 update would include a local data logging feature called The Journal. This was fantastic news. The prospect of gaining access to such a wide variety of in-game data promised to be just as big as a breakthrough for third-party tool development as the companion API had been a year prior. More importantly, the journal represented Frontier's best efforts so far to put to real action and developer resources behind the idea of supporting third-party tools. The 3 months following the journal's announcement up until the 2.2 release still remained an all-time high point in terms of productive communication between third-party developers and Frontiers. After soliciting our input and feedback, Howard Chalkley, Frontier senior programmer, did a great job of responding to and actually implementing many of our suggestions and requests, although we were baffled by his odd comment that the journal, quote, was not designed as a mechanism to export data into other databases, given that it's formatted in a machine-readable JSON, which would be unintelligible to the average player. One has to wonder if Frontier thought that that data would go, if not into other databases. Which I have to admit, that's pretty bizarre comment to make, because JSON is usually how you pass information from database to database or from a database to a client this day and age, replacing everyone's favorite, old-time favorite, SOAP and XML. What's the cure for not enough XML or problem with XML? More XML. At any rate, still, we were greatly encouraged by Frontier's apparently renewed interest in supporting third-party development, and we'd hope to continue this kind of collaboration. We saw with the journal. Having recently relaunched our EDCD Discord server, we decided to take the initiative and create a private channel for discussion between Frontier and core EDCD members. We'd hoped that this dedicated communication channels, insulated from the clamor of public forums, could be used as a useful tool for fostering ongoing collaboration and prevent public outrage over minor issues by giving Frontier the opportunity and venue to solicit focused feedback in advance. No, it's really not, because at that point, it becomes meeting behind closed doors and smoke-filled back rooms in a way that is very difficult. I understand Frontier's not going to use that method of communication. They're going to use a method of communication in which they can control. Sorry, but I kind of understand where Frontier is actually coming through on that. But that's not to say that they couldn't host a private section of their forum for developers to have more feedback, host their own Discords that then they invite the developers into discussions, or Google Hangouts or Skype meetings or GoToMeeting or whatever to hold these type of discussions. Because I think some of this stuff probably wouldn't matter a whole lot to the public, whether something was broken in a JSON string or things like that. At any rate, October 2016 release 2.2. The development of the player journal during 2.2 beta was a hopeful time for the community of third-party tool makers. But those hopes quickly faded after the 2.2 release. Kind of like almost all of the betas are usually hopeful of players of maybe this time they'll get it right, only to see those hopes quickly dashed when a shitty release is pushed to live with many known issues and problems that are never even addressed, that desperately required more beta testing, more rounds of beta before it should have been ever made available to the general player base. But at any rate, the private Discord channel that we provided for Frontier went completely unused. Again, I can kind of see Frontier's point here. Not to say that there shouldn't be communication, because there absolutely should be. Brent C., Frontier community manager, said hello once, but no one ever responded to our questions there, and our private messages still went unanswered for weeks, and usually produced no resolution for the issues we raised. Again, I think that the onus is on Frontier to figure out some way of collecting this data in some way that'll actually be listened to. I guess is the best way of putting it. Going to third-party player groups and stuff like that, and again, the equivalent of smoke-filled back rooms on different people's Discords or TeamSpeaks or whatnot, probably not the best way to handle it. Communications on the forums also began to break down again. We were told that the journal thread was no longer monitored, and we should submit ordinary bug reports to the usual QA bug triage process. But the usual QA bug triage there's a bug triage process is not well suited for this purpose, because after the initial "we'll pass this on" response, the bug report is forgotten and there is no follow-up communication about when or if we should expect a fix. As a result, Frontier fixes for journal and other API bugs have often ended up inadvertently breaking third-party tools all over again because we had no advance notice to prepare for them. That's true just about everything, that their bug reporting process is via the forums and stuff like that is I don't know. There are better tools out there to use for this that are much better to use with community engagement. I know Trello is a favorite of people these days. Back in the day, Track, all of those good things. There are tools designed specifically to gather this and provide information in a much more meaningful way back to both the consumers and the developers. But I digress. Again, there's tools there. There are tools that don't cost anything. Lots of stuff out there in the open source world that could be utilized for this, but anyway. The 2.2 release notes also mention that many star systems were controlled by planet settlements. Those have been upgraded to dockable bases. While this may seem like an innocuous change, it presented a problem for us because at this point, we had already collectively spent hundreds of hours cataloging almost every dockable station in the game. Converting some of the known number of settlements into bases meant that for some unknown portion of our database was now incorrect. This left us with two options. We could spend many more hundreds of hours tediously re-verifying every single settled star system, or Frontier could simply provide us a list of the upgraded settlements for us to easily update our records. We sent Zach and Tanichi and Edward Lewis multiple private messages asking for such a list, and we were given hope to get access to it, but it never materialized. March 2017. Apologies. On March 24th, Zach and Tani sent a message to several EDCD members saying that it was really sorry for the lack of comms, but this was all. Comms didn't noticeably improve after this, and nothing else happened. April 2017, release 2.3. Patch 2.3 is a mixed bag. On the one hand, there were some great changes and additions to the journal, and Howard Shockley reappeared in the forum thread to announce and discuss many of them throughout the 2.3 beta. On the other hand, all engineering information disappeared from the companion API. This meant, for example, that players could no longer import their engineered ship builds into tools such as ED Shipyard and Coriolis, which was a feature that had been often requested and took countless hours of work to develop. 2 weeks after the patch, still not clear if this change was a bug or an intentional removal of the feature. Past and the future. Overall, the past 2 years have been challenging both from a technical and a motivational standpoint. At times, Frontier has seemed genuinely interested in supporting our work, but at other times they've almost seemed to forget that we exist, or that might be impacted by a change they are about to make. Various people at Frontier have expressed their appreciations for the things we create, but it can be hard to remember that within our inquiries and bug reports so often go unanswered. Or hard to remember that when our inquiries and bug reports so often go unanswered. Given the massive amount of time and energy that we have collectively invested into our projects, it should go without saying that we are huge fans of Elite Dangerous and huge supporters of Frontier developments. We would like nothing more than to continue to create tools and fan sites until the Thargoids reduce the last human settlement to ash, but we can't do that alone. We need Frontier meeting us halfway by communicating with us, and fully supporting the interfaces that we rely on. We hope that this event will start a conversation that will lead to a bright future of collaboration communication between Frontier and the community of third-party developers who have rallied who have rallied around Elite Dangerous. Scroll up after the main message for the update. Okay. Why can't we just say, at this point, just not the API developers. We need Frontier to meet us halfway by communicating with us and fully supporting not only the interfaces, but the community as a whole here. Basically meet us halfway by communicating. Some of the major problems with 2.1 and the engineers that then subsequently took them another 7 months to go back and redress through multiple patches could have been solved if back in February of 2016, David Braben did a conference call with investors saying that Q1 revenue would be down because they were moving the release of 2.1 to quarter 2. The reason for this delay was that they had gameplay data that showed players overwhelmingly were stuck in repetitive and admittedly boring gameplay loops, doing the same things over and over again, and that wasn't how they envisioned people playing the game. So they were going to take a few weeks to get it right and release the engineers. which the way that you unlock engineers forced players into having to mine, go exploring, gain reputation with a minor faction, in some cases commit piracy, you do smuggling, basically introduce them to all of the different aspects of gameplay there were within the game universe. Not a bad concept. However, it was extremely poorly delivered. The execution was piss poor. From game-breaking bugs such as the plasma accelerator beam lasers, to balance issues with engineered weapons, in particular the heat meta, that basically took 5 months, and wasn't until Eurogamer gave him some negative press about it that Frontier stepped to the plate and finally did something about it and fixed it. And just the fact that people were reporting back when the item that was required to do engineering in beta, during a very too short of a beta for that major of a feature overhaul, was repetitive, boring, and really added nothing in terms of depth of gameplay. That this seemed like it was the path of least resistant and the least fun way of sitting there and essentially pulling the lever of a slot machine over and over again until you got the special effect that you wanted, and that there were some serious design issues with it. And then it got pushed to live anyway, and basically a lot of people, including myself, took about 3 months off at that point until they fixed the most egregious problems with it. But again, they released this feature where if you had data that showed you that your plans and expectations of how you thought people would play the game, and therefore how you were designing the game, is indeed not how people are actually playing the game, that maybe you should go back and solicit feedback from your consumer base, from your player base, to try to figure out and bridge that divide. Okay, if our plans aren't working and people aren't playing the way we thought they would, how this worked out in our brains and on paper, then what do we need to really address how people really are playing the game? If that's the case, I think entire feature sets would have been massively altered. Maybe that would happen for Season 3. I seriously doubt it because, again, there isn't communication from Frontier. Not really. I mean, the fact that 2.4 is still question marks. Season 3, they may still be in the planning, but I have a feeling that with at least some of the features that they're into the active development stage. And once again, I don't think that they've probably taken community feedback into account when they're making their designs. And it shows. At any rate, I just kind of wanted to bring this up because I thought that this was a fantastic microcosm of what I think has really been the problem with Elite Dangerous on the whole. So thank you very much for watching and sticking with me. I know this has been a longer video than even most that are on my channel, but I thought it was important to go through all of that because this is a microcosm of just all of the problems there with Frontier and how that they interact with the community as a whole, at least from my perspective.